Today I want to be as clear and frank as I can be. It's not my intention to cause offence, but to bring an important issue to the forefront of our thoughts and prayers. The protests in the USA at the moment, resulting from the brutal killing of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer, are gripping the attention of the news media and are in the thoughts and prayers of many. And you may be wondering, what's that got to do with me? Why would I feel the need to make a special video just about this? I'm a minister of 3 churches in beautiful, leafy communities in the heart of England. Churches made up of nice people, not racists. It's just that unfortunately we don't have many people in our congregations or communities who are black, Asian, or minority ethnic. So we can watch and pray, but surely it doesn't really affect us. Today I want to challenge us to think that actually, if we care about humanity, if we claim to love our neighbour, if we care about God's world and pray thy kingdom come, then these issues should be very important to us. Black Lives Matter. The protests and troubles at the moment as a result of George Floyd's killing is another flashpoint in the long and troubled history of race relations in the USA, going back through the civil rights movement, all the way back to the slave trade and even further back than that. It's the result of centuries of prejudice, discrimination and oppression against people of colour. That discrimination exists, even unconsciously, in the minds and actions of many. Black Lives Matter. And from the perspectives of my churches, where we try to be open-minded, inclusive, welcoming and understanding, it's easy to follow this up by saying, yes, all lives matter. Of course, it's true that all lives matter to God. Of whatever race or creed, God loves all people equally. I believe that very strongly. And there are multiple groups who face prejudice and injustice on a massive scale. But I think the problem is that when we hear that phrase Black Lives Matter and we quickly follow it up by thinking, yes, all lives matter, then we can actually be dismissing the problem, belittling it. We could be suggesting that this issue isn't really worth special attention. Black Lives Matter. But then there are the news reports we will have seen about riots, looting, buildings burnt and the like. And from our perspective, guided by the media, it can be easy to view these riots as just as bad, if not worse, than the killing itself. 1 man died, that's very bad, but haven't they now gone a bit too far? Now, I do not in any way approve of rioting or anything which causes people to live in fear. I don't approve of any violent protest. But I would urge us just to pause here and ask, why is it that we see the destruction of white people's property as being just as bad as the destruction of 1 black life? And the answer that comes to my mind is rather shocking. It is because not so long ago in our history, black lives were white people's property. And that thought fills me with horror and shame. Black Lives Matter. And of course, what's not been focused on in the media is just how many peaceful protests are going on, just how many prayer vigils are happening. The media we consume is content to suppress the truth that the majority of these protesters are good, law-abiding, often Christian people, while the minority of aggressors do nothing to honour the name of George Floyd, as his brother has said this week. Now, it's hard for me to speak on this subject with any authority, authenticity, experience or expertise. However, I still think I have something important to say on the matter, and that just speaks volumes about privilege. I am one of the most privileged people on the planet. Because of my ethnicity, gender, place of birth, sexuality, religion, age, physical ability, education, profession, wealth, I would be in the top 5% of any reckoning of the world's most privileged people. I have no personal experience of prejudice at all. I have no idea what it means to be oppressed or discriminated against. Therefore, my views on this matter are actually from an unfortunately blinded and disengaged point of view. I am, if you like, watching the play from the upper circle in one of the restricted view seats. The fact that I even chose that analogy says a lot about me. Many will never have the opportunity to go to a theatre. Equality is a wonderful idea, but it usually comes with a condition as long as we can still have all the privilege we've earned. And there lies a very privileged idea, that we've earned it. I've worked hard for this. Well, actually, I was born to very supportive and loving parents, in a safe environment, in a white British community, with good teachers and other positive role models, in a society where education up to degree level was free of charge. We weren't rich, but our parents were wise with money, and we had everything we needed. I did work hard, and so did my parents, but I am aware that people of colour with similar jobs to mine have most probably had to work an awful lot harder to get there, patiently battling against prejudice, suspicion, and oppression. True equality would mean that we all start off on the same footing, with similar opportunities, security, and influences. The world I was born into wanted me to succeed. Not everyone has that. Black Lives Matter. When Donald Trump orchestrated a photograph of himself standing in front of a church holding up a Bible after getting his henchmen to violently clear the paths in a display of power, I wrote the following on Facebook. When a president holds up a Bible outside a church for a publicity stunt, after clearing the streets of peaceful protesters using tear gas and ordering his armies to dominate the people, he needs to remember that he holds in his hands the story of a man who, in solidarity with the oppressed people of his day, overturned the tables in the temple, while those in power used excessive force and violence to put him and many others to death. That president should consider that the Bible he's holding and the church he's standing in front of are in favour of the crucified one, not Pontius Pilate, and they bear testimony to the power of love, not the love of power. I like to think it was a good, theologically valid response, and it gained a lot of approval, a lot of likes and shares from like-minded people, and lots of people have said similar things. But how typical and how ironic that as a white man in a position of privilege, I feel the need to be heard, the need to speak, to try to control. Well, what we should all really be doing is listening to the voices of the oppressed. And the question that has been nagging me is this: why didn't I write anything on Facebook when George Floyd was killed? Why did it take Donald Trump's Bible-waving incident to make me react? And the answer I've come to is that actually it was because all of a sudden it was about something dear to me. All of a sudden it became about the faith I hold dear. And I wanted to distance myself as far as possible from Trump's actions. I spoke up only because it now affected me. It should have been my cause from the start. In the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., speaking about the troubles in his own time, history will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition was not the strident clamour of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. Black Lives Matter. All lives are equal before God. God loves us all, yes, but while inequality and racism still exist, our efforts for those who from the start are on an unequal footing should be far greater. People of privilege like me do not need protecting or standing up for in quite the same way, because the system is not loaded against us from the start. This is not about making anyone feel guilty for their position in life, but it is about inviting us to understand the privilege we might have and how to turn that into a force for good. Black lives matter, and they should matter to all of us. And as privileged people, if we truly care, then when yet another black life is taken unjustly, or from whichever ethnic or religious community, then why don't we say to the people who are mourning, the people who have already suffered enough, will you let us join you and make this a struggle we share together? Will you let us stand alongside you? Will you let us use our combined resources to see justice done? And can we be the ones to make ourselves vulnerable so that you don't have to anymore? Will you forgive us when we use clumsy words and think we have all the answers? Will you help us to know when to speak up and when to listen?